Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. We are going to get started in just a moment. I want to make sure I'm live on Instagram and Facebook. Y'all know it's a tussle with Facebook cooperating to be able to do what it needs to do, but I think we got it going. So, today we're going to be talking about limiting beliefs that you might have. And if you see me looking, oh Lord, Facebook acting up. Okay, well, um, so if you see me looking over, my little one is napping. So let's pray, let's touch and agree that he stays asleep until I finish this, because this is something that's been on my heart for a couple days, and I wanted to share it with you. So this conversation started because over on Threads, y'all know I talk about Threads a lot. There was an author who posted an article that referenced, and I quote, I have the article pulled up for you. I'm not gonna give it any more attention than this because it's pretty outlandish and pretty pretty problematic with the headline. But essentially it says self-publishing is no longer the last resort for literary rejects. Now, if you are someone who has never chosen the path of even trying to look at traditional publishing, or if you previously did look at traditional publishing and it just didn't work out for you, whatever the case may be, maybe you had something where you were not able to get an agent, or maybe the querying process didn't work out for you, regardless of how you got to self-publishing or independent publishing, clearly that's a very salacious headline. And we are not, and I'm sure it was like that for a certain reason, because we know clicks are important. But say all that to say, I am finding that there are authors who feel as if they have to follow the path of traditional publishing, who feel like they have to play by the rules, quote unquote, of traditional publishing. And that's really just not the case. You don't have to follow this path that traditional published books have set up for you. And it's something where I know that people are inherently just doing it without even really thinking about it, because it's just something that you're used to. And I'm going to share over to the Facebook group so that these folks can see. But it's something that you're probably not even really realizing that you're doing, because you're just doing it inherently. It's just something that's second nature that you're doing. And so I'm going to give you some of the examples of that. But that headline, the thread about that, it was it was a lot going on. But I wanted to really focus in on this and kind of flip it into a positive, because we know that it's our job as authors to be the light, especially now with everything that's going on. And so I'm going to give you some strategies to remove those limiting beliefs, and also even truly realize and address them, because you might not even be thinking about how they are affecting you, and you might not even really know that they're affecting you. So, before I do that, I do want to tell you a little short story. So, I was my husband and I were at the park with our sons. That's their daddy, our son, our sons. And my oldest is a little tall for his age, and so he typically ends up playing with kids that are about his size but might not be about his age. And he's pretty mature for a 5-year-old. However, things happen. And so there were these two older kids that were playing with him, and they were trying to encourage him to swing higher on the swing. And he's like pumping his little legs. And these kids are probably no older. I mean, they probably were no older than like upper elementary, but he hasn't even started elementary school yet. He's in pre-K. And for him, he's like looking up to them. He's like, oh, I see him following him. And I'm kind of like hanging in the background, checking and looking, making sure the conversation stays safe for a 5-year-old. And they're like telling him, like, go higher, like go maximum speed, go maximum height. And he's like, no. And so I'm in the background like, yeah, turn him on in my head, because I don't want to be overbearing mama. But then they're like still egging him on, like, hey, no, you need to go maximum height because the kids at my school, da 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 da. And then my son, he gets louder and he says, I said no. And so, and he like shouts it at them, and then they leave him alone. And so that is something that made me think about this, because in the world of publishing, in the world of self-publishing, and really just authorship in general, we are told that there's certain things that you have to do. We're told there's certain things that are just like, oh, well, if you don't do this, you're not going to be successful. Or if you don't do this, then you're not going to sell any books. And honestly, that's really just not the case, except for marketing. If you don't do any marketing, there's a very high chance that you're not going to sell any books, unless you just suddenly some miracle, something happens with your book. But for the most part, there are typically more than one way to get something done. And so with that, one limiting belief that I'm seeing is that self-published authors and self-published and independent authors are assuming that they have to follow the traditionally published path. So they're assuming that the only way to make sure that I sell a lot of books is by really focusing on New York Times bestseller status, or these other bestseller statuses that are on Amazon. So assuming that, okay, if I get Amazon bestseller status, I'm going to sell a lot of books. You may or may not. It really depends on the category. It depends on the book. It depends on the competition. And bestseller status changes every hour. So the fact that you have it, it's cool and it's fun and it's a great way to like let your audience know that your book is selling to encourage more sales, but it's not necessarily a metric for ongoing sales. And even with the traditionally published bestseller statuses, so like for example, New York Times and other ones, there's a lot of scrutiny that's around those because of how they're actually acquired. I'll say that, acquired. I'll use that word for that. And so one metric that people tend to use, or one way that people tend to kind of gauge their success or to feel like they need to follow the path of traditionally published authors, is that they focus on hosting their pre-orders on Amazon. And if you have followed me for any length of time or you've seen any of my content recently, you know I'm a big proponent of not hosting your pre-order on Amazon. And some of the reasons for that are the fact that you're not going to get paid for your work until 60 days after your book is released. So let's say you have a 6-month pre-order on Amazon, and even with that, you're only able to do the ebook version directly on Amazon KDP. There are workarounds that you can do it through other platforms to have it connect through Amazon KDP, but it's directly through Amazon KDP. You can only do an ebook currently at this time. And so you're spending all this time and energy focusing on a ebook pre-order as opposed to focusing on a physical copy pre-order that you can typically charge more. As well, you're not getting paid until 60 days after you release. So let's say you have a 6-month pre-order. So you're doing all these things, spending all this time and energy, and then you're not getting your money until 8 months because you have to wait for that payout period. And no shade to Amazon. I'm thankful for those checks that come in at the end of the month. Actually, today or tomorrow is the deposit day. They sent an email earlier this week. And so I'm grateful for those and I'm happy for those. It's like an additional gift that is not a gift because I earned it because I wrote the books, but it's an additional thing that's like a drop in the bucket. However, it's not something that needs to be your main focus when you have other options outside of the platform, especially with the increased scrutiny that's happening within Amazon, in terms of boycotts that we know that are occurring, and also just general things that over the years people are kind of declining their shopping with that platform. And so typically people host their pre-order on Amazon because they think that's the thing to do. They think that's the thing that they have to do in order to be successful, and that's just not the case. And so that is one aspect. And then the next limiting belief that comes from traditional publishing is that the fact that you need to focus on page reads. And for this one, I think it's kind of a combination of indie authors and traditionally published authors thinking that, hey, Deb, over on Instagram, thinking that that's really the focus of what it needs to be. And if you're a romance author, if you have a book that's over 100,000 words, okay, cool. You can focus on page reads all you want because you have the amount of pages per book that are going to help you to get that income. But when you really think about it, if you do the math, you get paid 0.004 cents per page, and that's only on the first read of the page if you're using Kindle Unlimited, which is what I'm talking about to get these page reads. So let's say you so 0.004 cents on average per page. So let's say you have a book that's 100 pages. So on average, you're getting 40 cents per page or per book for someone that's reading it. And if you think about, okay, well, let's say I want to make $100 and I divide that by that 4 cents. I'm going to have 25,000 pages read. So that's going to be, if I take my 100 pages, that's 250 people that are going to have to buy that book for me to even to make that amount of money. And that's not even a break-even amount of money. That's just enough to kind of say, okay, this is a good metric for what you're doing. And so the focus on page reads is really bewildering to me. It's really wild. And I don't get it from that standpoint because you spent all this time and energy to be able to pour into this book, to create this book, and then you're getting paid pennies. Similar to traditional publishing. Like we know with traditionally published authors, they typically get in advance and then they get their money up front. And then they may or may not get royalties depending upon how their deal is worked out. And so I think that's a carryover onto independent authors or self-published authors, assuming that the only way that you can really make money or the only way you can make it as an author is that you're focusing on those page reads. And at the end of the day, why would you spend all that time and energy to only get 0.004 cents per page when you could do something like creating a book bundle to be able to get $40 per book, and then you're creating something that's an additional experience for your reader. And this is something I talk about in my book, which is I always do this backwards because it's backwards on my screen, which is here, which is Profitable Publishing with Pre-Order. So if you haven't grabbed your copy, you can do that, and I'll put the link in the chat for you to grab that. But you want to think about the ways in which you can create income that is beyond those page rates, because at the end of the day, if your focus is a return on your investment, if your focus is making sure that you are reaching your readers, things of that sort, you can do that a lot faster when you have profit that is behind that. So that's the second limiting belief, is that you have to focus on page reads when really you should be focusing on profit, is the flip side of that. Then another thing that I've seen on Threads, and really just other places as well, is that you have to wait until you've sold 3 books, or wait until you have a series. And I've even seen as far as, or as high as 20 books. 20. So the other day I was on Threads and someone was saying, oh, I'm not really seeing the results I want to see. I'm not really making the sales I want to see. And then another author was really trying to be genuine and nice in the comments, but they were saying, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I didn't really start seeing things progress until I wrote 20 books. Now, if you have to write 20 books in order to make a profit, that's not realistic for a lot of people. A lot of people don't have the bandwidth. A lot of people don't have the time. A lot of people don't have the funds, the energy to wait till you completed 20 complete books before you can make a profit. I don't believe that. I don't believe that has to be your reality. I don't believe that's something that has to be the norm. It definitely shouldn't be the norm, especially when you are doing the right things to make sure that your book is going to sell before you write the book. There's a woman that I follow. She supports authors with their editing. Her name's Abigail Keys, and she just did a post recently that was talking about research. Before you are writing your book, it's so important to do market research to understand who it is that you are writing your book for, where they are coming from, and how they are going to be helped by what it is that you create. So that way you're not waiting until your 3rd book, your 2nd book, your 20th book, bananas, to be able to make a profit. It really shouldn't be that way. It's not something that you have to belabor the point to get to the money. And I say that from experience. So from all of my books that I've published under my personal name that I've done active marketing, not pen name books, I've made a profit on each of them. And then also the authors that I support that I feature in my book, and that I also will feature in my challenge that's happening on Sunday, which I'll tell you about in a second. Each of them have made money before their book is released, or within the first 3 to 6 months. Because when you do the work and you look for your reader, and you are not necessarily writing to sell, but you're writing to make sure that you have an audience that is actually there. You've done the research to see, okay, do people actually want this thing? Or am I just writing this for myself? Which, if that's the case, that's fine. That's a whole different situation. Writing for yourself, that's perfectly fine. There's books that I've published that I'm like, I don't care, or that I will publish that I don't care if I make a profit from it. It's just something that's a passion project. That's fine. That's different. However, if you are coming into this and you're thinking, okay, I want to make sure that I am, and I just remember something else I needed to tell y'all, to make sure that I am making a profit from this, to make sure I am leaving a legacy, make sure I am reaching people, then you need to focus on the things that are actually moving the needle. And so in this case, what we've talked about so far, instead of hosting your pre-order on Amazon, finding another platform that works for you, and then also, instead of focusing on page reads, really focusing on profit from your books, because we know we need money to move things. It takes money to be able to do things in the author world and not in just the general world. And then not waiting until you've written your series, or not waiting until you've written your 3rd, 4th, 5th, 20th book in order to see sales. Because to me, that's wild. I can't, I can't imagine having to have waited that long, especially when it can take a couple years to write a book. For some folks, other folks can crank them out pretty quickly. Either way, even if you did a book a month, the amount of time and energy that it takes to promote each of those books is enormous if you are not making sales in between them. And you're just going to be someone who is just exhausted with the process. You're not going to want to keep writing these books if it takes you 20 books to get to the money. Now, ways to combat this is, first, I want you to sign up for my Pre-Order Profits Challenge, and I'll pop that on the screen so you can see what that's about. If you're on Instagram, you won't be able to see this. I'll move it over my face for a sec so you can see what's going on. We start Sunday at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we will focus on the different ways to make a profit from the beginning, meaning that you are going to be able to find strategies, and also not find, I'll be teaching these strategies, teaching you strategies of how to make money before your book is finished, as well as different mistakes and misconceptions that you want to avoid and overcome, so that way you can get to your profit, so that way you can find those folks and make sure that you are supporting them where they are, whether your book, whatever the category your book is. And so with this, it doesn't necessarily matter your genre, more so the strategy is what we'll be focusing on. And so you can register for that at preorderprofits.com, and I'll add that in the chat for you as well. And I didn't mention this earlier, but if you have questions, add them. And if you are watching this later on replay, then add them in the chat and I'll come back and answer them. So, all right, let's move over to the strategies to overcome these limiting beliefs. And so when I first decided to do this, I thought about that GIF from Real Housewives of Atlanta with I don't even know their names because I don't watch that show, but it's a real popular GIF of like, who said that, and I think it was Portia, Candy, and some of the ladies. And when you're getting advice from folks in the author world, you really want to be mindful of who it's coming from. You really want to be mindful of their background, of their motives, of their motivations, and whether or not they are in alignment with your motives, your motivations, and your goals. And so, for example, I focus on self-published authors, independent authors, and the like. And so I don't give advice to people who are traditionally published authors because it's a different path, it's a different journey, it's not my forte, it's not my strength. And so I don't give them advice. However, when I look at the opposite end of the spectrum, sometimes that traditionally published advice kind of leaks over into the independently published world and the self-published world. And it's something where you want to be mindful of, okay, is this person in my same genre? Do they have the same goals as me? Did they work with an agent? Are they doing it solo? Are they pressed because they're not making sales because they didn't do their research? So you want to take the advice that you're getting with a grain of salt. You want to make sure you are seeking wise counsel from folks. You want to make sure you're working with people who know what they're talking about. And the way you can tell that is through the results they're sharing, testimonials, their own book success, their own reviews, and also be mindful that all of that might not be visible on Amazon. A couple years back, I was in a group and actually just left the group because they were tripping. They were tripping on some stuff, and I hadn't been paying attention in the group, but I saw a post and I commented, and then anyway, I'll leave that there. So anyway, it's a group for authors and self-published authors, and some of the advice in there was just very negative and very just wrong, just flat out wrong. Like, you're saying that this is the only way to make money. You're saying that this is the only way to do this thing. Literally, I work with authors that do this, the thing that you're saying is not possible every single day. And I see other people that are doing the same thing every single day. And so you want to make sure that the advice that you're getting is from a place of positivity and love for what it is that whatever you're trying to do. And then also that it actually is from someone who knows what they're talking about, because unfortunately, there is a lot of bad advice out there in the author world, and it's not something that's really regulated. There's not really regulatory bodies. There are some who are like Ally. There are some that support authors to help them kind of navigate this space, but in general, there are a lot of scammers in self-publishing. And so you want to be mindful to make sure that you are following advice that is in alignment with your goals and what you want to accomplish, so that you're able to see the results that you want to see. And then also you want to think about running your race. So at the beginning of this, I told you a story about my son who was not listening to some bullies who were they weren't really bullies, but he called them bullies, but we talked about that. We were talking about how people will try to get you to do what they want you to do because it benefits them. And or people will try to give you advice that doesn't really align with what you want to do. And you don't have to go that route. So you can decide to not put your pre-order on Amazon. You can decide to not focus on those page reads and not be a part of Kindle Unlimited because that doesn't align with what you want. I talk about this in my book, Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders, that I did a campaign where I did the 5-day Kindle Unlimited, the freebie campaign that you can do. You can do 3 to 5 days, but I did the 5-day one. And with that, I took that data, and then before I uploaded it to there, I did an ebook version on my site. So I pushed traffic to my site for people to be able to order the pre-book version before I put it in Kindle Unlimited. And on my site, I made, I want to say it was $800 within that timeline. It was either $600 or $800. $600 or $800 within that timeline, and then the same amount of time, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, I made $26 on Amazon KP for the free promo, because of course people are downloading it. It's free, so you're not gonna make as much. And so I said, this is not worth it. And of course I knew it wasn't before then, but I just did it as a way to get those reviews and things like that. And one thing that I also talk about this in the book, but one thing I want you to keep in mind is that people don't always value things that are free. unless they've made some sort of investment in it in terms of like a time investment or an energy investment. So like, for example, I have the free challenge. And so if you're attending, you're coming, that means you're locked in for those 4 days. So that way you're investing your time and it's something you'll value. And I did it last year and people got great results even from the challenge. And the opposite end of the spectrum is when you are putting things up on Amazon KDP for Kindle Unlimited, sometimes people just download your book because they see it's free and they don't actually take the time to read it. They don't typically leave you a review unless you have a way to remind them. So unless you have a way to let them know, hey, please leave a review during this day. So unless they're on your email list or unless they're following you on social media and they happen to see your post, because we all know social media can be kind of flip-floppy and not as consistent with that. And so saying all this to say, long story short, don't feel like you have to follow these paths just because they're laid out before you. Understand that there are multiple paths to be successful when it comes to your self-publishing journey. And your job is to run your race and decide what path is for you. Then actually act. So do the thing that is in alignment with what it is that you want to accomplish. And then third, actually invest. So whether you're investing your time, your money, your energy, whatever case that may be, those are going to be the ways that you can help to come up out of these limiting beliefs. Because though self-publishing came as a result of in our modern times, so though self-publishing came kind of as like an opposite to traditional publishing, it doesn't have to follow the same rules. The beauty of being a independent author, the beauty of being a self-published author is that you can kind of make up the rules as you go for some things. You can also decide what paths that you want to follow. You can decide, oh, I want to borrow this from traditional publishing. I want to borrow that from hybrid publishing. I want to borrow that from independent publishing. And you can make it what you want to make it. The part that leads to frustration is when you're trying to, y'all remember that toy, and I have one, but I don't have the pieces because my kids move them around. But that thing where it's like, okay, you have a rectangle hole, and you're trying to fit a circle in the rectangle hole, and it's not going in because you're trying to fit a model that doesn't work for you and your lifestyle into something that doesn't fit. And so, for example, like right now, I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I also work and do this. I work as a full-time entrepreneur as well as a stay-at-home mom. And so there's certain things I've had to adjust to fit within this season of my life. And if for some reason I decide to take another route, I'll have to adjust during that season. When I worked full-time as an educator and was still doing my businesses or was going to grad school, I had to make things fit within a certain realm of my life. And so understand that each book is different. Understand you don't have to be locked into these different paths that are seemingly set for you, and that you have the freedom and flexibility to be able to make adjustments for what works for you and your self-publishing journey. So let me check the chat for comments to see if we have any. And I'm going to check over on Facebook because it was not letting me connect. But with this, I just want you to have the takeaway that I want you to have is that you can chart your own path and you can decide. Sorry. Okay. You can decide the way in which you want to show up as an author. You don't have to follow traditionally published standards. You have the freedom and flexibility to be an independent author, self-published author, whatever you want to call yourself, and walk in that and live in that and rest in that. And so if you need support on the profitable side, then I encourage you to either grab my book that is coming out next week, and it's called Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders. And so I walk through the full step-by-step process of how I'm able to host 4- and 5-figure pre-orders for myself and my clients that work with me. And then alternatively, if you are somewhat new to pre-orders or you need a refresher or you want to know some strategies to support you on your pre-order and your journey and mistakes to avoid, then I encourage you to sign up for the challenge. And the links for that are in the description of this video. All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat. Let me know as you're watching on replay. Hey, Stacy. Let me know as you're watching on replay what your biggest takeaway was or if there's any questions I can answer for you. Have a good one.